Hey, sports fans, it's world champion handicapper Mike North. Punch this number in your phone right now. If you're driving, pull over. 1-800-808-3419, 1-800-808-3419 for a free pick and info for the premier handicapping site in the country, VegasScoresAndOdds.com. It's the only site you'll ever need with expert handicappers like John Anthony, Denny Macklin, Tony Sacco, Ray Monahan, yours truly, and many more. Check out the homepage of VegasScoresAndOdds.com for a tote board with your buddy. Follow Vegas Scores and Odds on Twitter and dial up 1-800-808-3419. It's 1-800-808-3419, 1-800-808-3419, or go to VegasScoresAndOdds.com.
The following program is distributed by the Bears Barroom Radio Network. It's presented live over MixLR.com and later disseminated in podcast format on most delivery platforms. It's intended for all audiences. Never before in the history of sports podcast has one show made this promise. Draft on Tap will report on every college prospect pro scouts are looking at for the 2020 NFL Draft. Every one of them.
Sanders, smothered. Chase Young, another big play.
Montez second and goal. Steps in. Caught. Touchdown. The third passing touchdown of the first half for Steven Montez. There's Johnson. He's got it. Touchdown, Texas. An open man at the 25. A foot race for the tight end. There's that man again. Albert O with his second score. 47 yards.
Draft on Tap with Bears Barroom draft analyst Denny Shimon. Your host, Ryan Badgley. And featuring some of the most respected draft analysts in the country. Grab a beer. We're about to make history.
And making history is what we do on Bears Barroom Radio Network. Good evening, everybody. I'm your host, Ryan Badgley, and welcome to Draft on Tap. We have another exciting show planned for you tonight as special guest Matt Waldman will join us in just a moment. So tape up those wrists and let's introduce our Bears Barroom draft analyst, Danny Shimon. Danny, how you doing tonight, brother?
Ryan, my friend, how are you doing tonight? I'm doing great, man. I'm excited. We're talking pass rushers tonight. Oh, yeah.
Danny, when we talked earlier in the week, man, over text, I could see you in the excitement about talking up the defensive line, the edge, and I got to be honest, some of these guys on your list, I'm excited to see, and I'm excited to talk them with you as well, man. So, any shockers, or you think everybody?
There's a couple of names I think some, unless you're a diehard college football fan, you may not recognize, but I think for the most part, everyone on my list should be someone that our fans have our listeners have heard of. Let's just say that. But it's definitely, I love talking about offensive and defensive linemen because I feel like that's where the teams are built is in that trenches and getting guys like this, edge rushers off, coming off, creating sacks, creating pressure, creating turnovers is key to building a team. So I definitely, when I get into offensive line, when I get into defensive linemen, that's the two spots that I really love. Breaking those film down and just technique. You're talking about hand use, talking about size, everything, etc. So yeah, I love these two position groups.
And what a perfect guest we have with us tonight, Danny. Matt Waldman from the Rookie Scouting Portfolio creator and the senior staff writer at Football Guys. Matt, welcome to the show, and hope you're ready to talk some defensive linemen.
Oh, yeah, I'm strapped up and ready to go, and I definitely appreciate you guys having me on. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, it is, and I'll turn it right over to Danny and let him jump right into some of these prospects that are big prospects without a doubt.
Hey, Matt, how are you tonight? Thanks again for joining us. We appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Let's do it.
Yeah, so you just heard me talking right now about me presenting my top 10 preseason defensive edge / pass rushers coming into this college football season, and a couple of them are on my list, and I think a couple of them that you are familiar with as well is Well, first of all, let's go guy from the top, Chase Young, Ohio State. I think for me, and not only is my top edge rusher, he might be, by the time this whole process is over with, my top overall prospect in this draft. I mean, that's how much I'm high I am on him. Can I get your thoughts on Chase Young from Ohio State?
Oh, absolutely. And I can certainly understand why you feel the way you do about him. I mean, this is a guy with a great get off. His first 2 steps are so graceful and quick. And, I'm going to give you an offensive skill player equivalent to anybody who may just, who definitely wants to learn more about the guys in the trenches. But if you think way back to a guy like Robert Smith, who played at Ohio State as a running back, and you think about how he was a kind of a long striding back who didn't look like he was as moving as fast as he really was, who started with the Minnesota Vikings. Chase Young has that kind of graceful movement about him where he doesn't look like he's going as fast as he is, but he's unbelievably swift. And when he sees his target, he has a great finishing burst. He's someone that, because he's so graceful and well balanced in his play, he's difficult for players to cut. I think he drops well into space as an end and can cover or drop or come back upfield to tackle. I think he wraps up pretty well. And I could even see how he might be able to play a little bit of outside linebacker if someone wanted to move him there. But I think he's primarily a 4-3 defensive end. I mean, that's where I'd love to see him play. And if a lineman can't get his hands on Young, it's pretty much over because he's going to be able to bend that corner and close fast. I think that he's someone that he uses his hands well to either swipe or rip or swim or spin. And I think he has a pretty darn good inside counter move that sometimes I watch that and I think it's better than some of his outside moves right now. And he reads gaps well. He's disruptive in terms of the run game. He can blow up lead blockers or get into rushing lanes. And I think that he's someone that stacks and sheds pretty well. And he's good at running stunts and twists, which obviously is nice to have when you have an athletic defensive end like him.
Yeah, you just hit on all of them right there. I love his size, the length, the athletic ability. Something I want to touch on here, and with all Ohio State guys, well, at least it seems like with these Ohio State players, their hand usage, the way they come out already, well coached, to the NFL level where their hand usage. I mean, we're going back to the Bosas, even Sam Hubbard. The way these guys use their hands coming out of Ohio State is really something that I appreciate, and something that obviously you can see they're well coached, at the school. So Young, just like the other 3 guys I just mentioned, comes out with the ability to shed, be able to swat, rip, get through offensive line, the arms, in the terms of blockers. But that stood out to me right away. Besides the size, besides the athletic ability, is his hand usage. Did that something I'm assuming caught your eye as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's something that oftentimes guys rely on, like one move and they don't even have a counter. So when you have a prospect of his magnitude in terms of athletic ability, and he already displays 3 to 4 pretty good moves already that can always be refined a little bit more. That's a great thing for a prospect to have, and that puts him ahead of the game from a lot of other guys. For me, the only question I have, and I wondered if you've seen the same thing, and I haven't watched a ton of Young at this point, but I've watched enough games that I can say there's times that I don't see the mindset of relentless pursuit, where you see a guy who has all those athletic gifts, a lot of the technical skills, but I don't always see the motor to the level that I see with some other guys, even some guys that maybe we're probably going to talk about a little bit there. And it might be nitpicking at this point, but I know that there's some guys I know who I talk with, like former scout Dan Hatman over at the Scouting Academy, who's worked with the Giants and the Eagles. And, one of the things I saw him say on Twitter the other day was, when I see a guy with great athletic gifts, but he doesn't have that motor, I wonder what's going on there a little bit. I don't know if it's at that level where there's anything that we should be really concerned about with Chase Young, but it's something that I've noted along the way when it comes to, this path of evaluating a player all the way into the draft.
That's funny you mentioned that, Matt, because I was kind of, looking at his tape and I'm trying to find things to put down. And one of the things I put down was, when his initial pass rush is thwarted, when he's got a double team, I see him kind of winding down a little bit, not fighting through a double team, not continuing his pass rush, kind of just saying, all right, or if the play is going away from him, I see him kind of slowing down. So that's funny you mentioned that, because I thought I was being nitpicky, but because you got to put something down. The guy is not perfect, but that's curious how you saw the same thing that I did. In terms of when his initial burst, his initial pass rush is thwarted off by a blocker, whether it's by a double team, by a chip or whatnot. I see him kind of shutting it down a little bit, not to the extent where he's giving up on the play or he's just not hustling at all. But I don't see that, like you said, that all out, all hustle, revving up the engine at 100 miles an hour, so on and so forth. So I agree with you on that part. Yes.
And I think that the difference between being like a fan of the game and when you really start getting into analyzing players is that you do have to nitpick, because we're talking about, college football players are probably the top 90% of all high school, or the top 10% of all high school players that are in the country. So when you think about it from that perspective, the best college players are probably the top 95% of all football players that play in the United States and Canada. And then when you get to the pros, you're really jumping from about the top, from the 95th percentile. It's really like the 99.5 percentile. And the jump between, that 4% or 4.5% jump doesn't sound like much, but it's unbelievable how little details matter in that small of a jump. Because if you think about it in terms of errors per million or errors per thousand or whatever you're counting it, if you think about it from a standpoint of like you're a manufacturing job and you're on a line and you're manufacturing products, they measure things in errors per million. And when you look at a player, the rate of errors goes way down when they get to the NFL, and everything has to be so much more precise than it does in the college game. And so, fans may think of that as nitpicking, but it's important stuff to take note of.
The next player I want to talk about, and this kid, hopefully we'll agree on this one. I don't see any quit in this guy. This guy I say he's got that junkyard dog mentality, and then that's the Kenny Willekes from Michigan State. I just love his football character. I love the all-out hustle. I love the versatility he shows in terms of being able to stand up, in my opinion, stand up as an outside linebacker or even play some wide nine or some defensive end in the NFL. Curious what your thoughts on are Kenny Willekes from Michigan State.
Yeah, and that was the guy I was alluding to as well, that his motor is absolutely on all the time. And you kind of expect that from a guy who was a walk-on turned All-American. He's a high-intensity player, good length, explosive athletic ability. I think he has a really superb understanding of leverage. He understands how to get into the position on a defender when he opens himself up in a certain way and be able to take advantage, and he'll toss bigger players around the field. He's very difficult to block in the run game because has that short area quickness. He has super heavy hands, so it helps him stay clean from blockers and run through linemen. And he even anchors well and sets the edge to redirect runners back inside. I think he finds the ball really well. I think the only thing that's kind of really lacking in his game that may put him behind some other guys in terms of draft capital, because we often see that scouts may like certain players and see the complete player, but I find more and more that oftentimes, whether it's a general manager or a president of an organization or an owner of an organization, they may not see these guys. They may not look at these guys as complete products in the way that scouts or scouting directors do, and they may fall in love with certain things. And because Willekes lacks that top speed, I mean, the first step quickness is there, the closing acceleration is there. They may feel like that from a workout standpoint, they may choose somebody else. And I think that would be somewhat of a mistake because, I think he's one of the more compelling defensive ends or 3-4 pass rushers available, and someone that I think could be a very good NFL player.
Speaking of his speed, Matt, is that something as he goes on that he can improve on, that teams will have specific things for him to work on that he may be doing now?
It's a great question. And I think for defensive end, it's not going to be as important. But it's going to be important for the pre-draft process. To me, like the pre-draft process is a game. It's kind of like a game that's separate from the NFL, unfortunately, at times. And so, he's going to be able to work on his get off and and his starts in terms of from a track standpoint for the 40 and for his pro day workouts and things like that. But some of that may help him in terms of his get off the line and make him a little bit quicker, even a little bit quicker than what he is. But also a lot of it too is, to me, speed in a short area, especially in the trenches, is often about awareness, how aware you are, how mentally prepared you are, how do you see things well? Because it's just like wide receiver play, even outside the trenches. You can have a 4-4 guy, or you can have a 4-7 guy and like a 4-3 guy, and the 4-3 guy doesn't know how to run routes or get off the line of scrimmage. He's going to play slower than the 4-7 guy.
Yeah, which is an interesting point. I think it's as an outsider looking in, not having that scouting knowledge myself personally, you watch a live game versus watching it on tape, and sometimes when you see it watching it a different way, it kind of jumps off the screen at you a little bit. I don't know. I've seen a little bit of Kenny Wilkes. I really like this kid. I think he might be a decent fit for the Bears if needed, as being part of the Bears Barroom Radio Network. That's one of the things we're always looking at is, what of these guys is there potential for them to join the Chicago Bears? And, that's a guy I definitely would be excited to see.
Yeah, and I can see why. And see, to me, I mean, I grew up a Cleveland Browns fan in the 1970s and 80s. So to me, the AFC Central, the old AFC Central, is very similar to the NFC North in terms of the mentality of what you're looking for in terms of defense. And so I would, I come from that kind of blue collar mentality of a defense that you're looking for. And I understand completely why any Bears fan would covet this guy, because I know I would love to have him. Anyone who can stop the run the way he does and be relentless and smart, and how the way you use your hands is so important. And the fact that he has heavy hands and understands leverage, you can get the athletic guy. You can have the more athletic guy. And I bet more times than not that I'd rather have the guy who's athletic enough, who has all the technical skills, as opposed to the guy who's a super athlete who doesn't have the technical skills or savvy at all.
So moving on here, Auburn's Derek Brown.
Oh, I love him. I kind of joke around that when you watch him play, it's kind of like watching those old Godzilla movies, so, because he's the type of guy who can literally move guards and centers and move them into the path of the rushing lane and play games with the running back by doing that. Like, just literally get his hands on you, move you a couple of steps into that lane, and present a leverage show in terms of position that forces the running back to cut in a different direction, right where he's going to end up shedding the guard and meet you. So it's kind of like watching him like move a skyscraper, as he's kind of sacking a city. He plays the center as the nose as well as a tackle and over the tackling guard, so he can be a zero tech. He can play the 0, the 1, 2, or 3 tech. He finds a second position where he can bull rush or turn a defender and neutralize that lineman's hands on him. I think he does a really good job of getting the correct shoulder against a guard or center and using his leverage to work past them. He gets sideways really well to slip linemen and then reshape his body so that he can initiate the first strike. He splits double teams with strength a lot, but he does have a rip that works pretty well to disengage. He can slide over the next gap and disrupt runners. He's quick enough to work across the face of guards and centers, so he can stunt pretty well, especially when they're trying to double team him. He can stunt around them and get to the opposite shoulder. Violent hands. He's going to rock defenders with that first strike. And when he pulls out the club on a guard, that guard's going to stagger, and then he can even forklift centers. I mean, if you're if you remember Jumpy Gathers and what he used to do with the Falcons in Washington, where he could get under you and just move you into the backfield. I've watched Derek Brown dump a center into Texas A&M quarterback's lap, a couple of times during a game. So this is a guy that is just, I think he's one of the best players on the and if in college football, and if he has to be double teamed, and he's one of those guys that's just, he has an effective one arm. He He has a rip club and push pull. I just like to see him use the moves a little more. He just leans on that bull rush so much because he can, that he doesn't always use his hands. So he may need a little bit of an acclimation time in the NFL where he's going to have to do that. But he's also a smart guy who sniffs out screens. He blocks passing lanes rather than attacking the quarterback when it comes to that. And, the only thing is he's a defensive tackle. So he's not going to bend the edge as a rusher. So sticking him at the 3 or 4 is probably not ideal. He's probably better as a nose, but he's a guy that is going to collapse pockets and get sacks as a result of that.
It looks like you read my notes, because every single thing I put down here is like you just mentioned, and it's everything. I mean, talking about in terms of taking on double teams. This guy is literally immovable. I seen at one point I saw 2 blockers on him, and then a guard as is trying to release out into the field, come up and chip him as well. And this kid did not move. Now talking about that club move. It reminds you a little bit of Reggie White, a little bit, where he could, because he knocked Alex Leatherwood, the tackle from Alabama, sideways with that club move last year. So, and then I just put on his Oregon tape from the big opening game of the season. I mean, 1-on-1 at the goal line was unfair. I mean, this kid is so powerful. The only question with him is, you said you saw him more as a 3-4 nose, or do you see him? Can you play maybe like a 5 technique as well? Probably.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he can probably do that. And he's a type, as long as you're not asking him to be like an edge guy and come off the edge necessarily, and rely on him to be kind of that type of edge player. Right. I think you can definitely put him at the 5, and he'd be good. I mean, he's gonna wreck guards. I mean, if he has a 1-on-1 on a guard, he will wreck those guys.
And athletic, I think he could probably play some 3 technique if you're looking at a 4-3 scheme.
Yes, absolutely. And then that's what also gives you that kind of pass rushing threat. So I think you're absolutely right about that. I just think it's just funny because of how strong he is. I think it's going to translate well to him against centers, in the game, and as a 4-3 defender where he can occupy double teams, force double teams on him, and free up other guys.
Switching to another defensive tackle, this one I'm more kind of have mixed results on. I mean, I watch him and there's some plays I like him. There are other plays I'm just kind of like, don't see as much. But Javon Kinlaw from South Carolina, I mean, he's got the size, he's got what you're looking for in the interior. But then there's times we talked about, that motor not running at 100 miles an hour all the time. And there's times that he's just there, just kind of taking up space, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on him?
And I agree with you. I think the whole isn't the sum of his parts right now. He's just not consistently disruptive. He doesn't hold up well against double teams, but he can get a push against the center or guard 1-on-1. He flips his hips well to change arms and redirect when using a 1-arm technique on opponents. So there's some agility there. There's some ability to use some decent technique. He has a pretty good club against guards. He has an effective swim move, and he has strong closing acceleration. And he's a big guy who dropped about 40 pounds before he even got to Columbia. And he still looks like a sizable, muscular defensive tackle. So he's one of those guys that, like we kind of alluded to, versus Willekes. I mean, obviously they're not playing the same position, so it's an apples to oranges comparison to an extent. But Kinlaw's that guy who, athletically he looks good. He flashes a lot in certain situations, but it's just not consistently there for me. So to me, he's one of those guys that you might take in the second day or third day of a draft and feel pretty and hope that you can work with him and develop him. And after the interviews and meetings you have with him, if you're convinced that he has that type of mentality to work at his game and be a professional, then you take him and you're excited about it. But if you're taking him on the first day or early second day, I think that would be a bit of a reach.
Matt, we've got a question in our Mixler chat here for you. When scouting defensive linemen, is there one thing you look for first? One scout has told us first step, another is agility. What about you? What do you think? What do you look for first with a defensive lineman?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that for me, there's probably, if you're talking about the edge, then if you're looking for an edge player, I think it is probably about first and second step. That second step is even more important at times because that's where you start to begin to transition to the edge. And if you have that super quick second step, that's great. In addition to the but I would say it's, if those things are there, then it's the ability to really bend, the flexion at the ankles, the knee, and the hips, in the way that you can kind of drop that weight and turn that corner. For an end, that's important because you can teach the techniques of using your hands. You can, teach them different moves. But if they can't bend like that, then you're probably not going to get the type of player you want at end on that level.
Draft on Tap returns after these quick commercial messages.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alec Lifshos, a.k.a. Trey Busy, and I'm here to have a conversation with you guys about mental health. A lot of times in our communities, we don't talk about mental health enough, and it goes under the radar as a reoccurring issue. So I took the liberty to create the Let's Talk It Out podcast. This podcast was created to break the silence on mental health issues and to give a voice to those suffering. I have conversations with professionals in the mental health field as well as those who are suffering, and we break down different ways to stump stigmas and ways to cope with mental health conditions. The show is broadcasted live every Thursday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on Mixlr.com/LTIO podcast. That's MIXLR.com/LTIO podcast. If you can't make the live recording of the podcast, then you can find the podcast available to you on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Give the podcast a follow on Twitter and Instagram at LTIO Podcast on both platforms. Thank you, and I look forward to talking to you guys in the future.
We'll step away from the defensive lineman here, and I want to switch over and talk quarterback. Obviously, it seems to be quarterback is the favorite discussion for Heisman voters early on. Your top 2-3 quarterbacks that really have caught your eye so far this year, whether it's somebody that people aren't talking about yet or guys that are just continue to impress.
Yeah, and you're talking kind of about my wheelhouse here because I'm, as much as I love watching guys in the trenches, and I agree with Dan, it's like that's the most important. Those are the most important positions to build a football team. But with the rookie scouting portfolio, my main thrust is the offensive skill positions. Mm-hmm. So right now, the three guys that really interest me, and certainly you could throw Justin Herbert into the conversation, but everyone has talked about Tua Tagovailoa, and certainly I have a tremendous amount of respect for what I see with his game because, to me, what's very important about quarterbacks is footwork. How quick and precise are their feet in their drops and their transitions from moving from hitching to turning in the pocket and to being able to maintain a position where they can avoid pressure but still throw the ball. And to me, the feet are kind of like the window into the mind of what the quarterback is doing. And Tagovailoa has great feet that way. He's got the arm strength you're looking for. He has a good feel for the pocket. So I like a lot about his game. Joe Burrow, out of the former Ohio State quarterback with LSU. I'm a fan of what I'm seeing. I mean, this is a guy that he also has that good footwork, but he can play both in rhythm with the progressions, with his route progressions in the pocket. But then when pressure threatens, he's very good at being able to avoid pressure, reset, and fire with accuracy. He's a guy that when things go wrong, when he makes a bad decision because whether he's too aggressive or he's not accurate or he gets sacked, he's one of those guys that comes right back and makes a good play after that. He doesn't shy away. He lets it rip. He's confident in what he sees, and he's willing to target tight zones. I like the technical soundness of his game and the toughness there. And Anthony Gordon out of Washington State's a fun one just to talk about because he's really kind of caught my eye in terms of he can throw off platform or a variety of different platforms. He moves well in the pocket. He's good at being able to manipulate coverage just like Tua and Burrow in terms of opening up during their drops to one side to hold the safety or hold a linebacker and at the last moment come back. And out of all those three, he might be the best at holding the gaze of a defender and manipulating them the longest before he turns back and lets that ball go to the opposite side of the field or to a check down. He has really good knowledge of his check downs as well. And so those are three compelling guys for me at the quarterback position.
Gordon is a guy that to me is also compelling. He's a kid that the more success Gardner Minshew has in the NFL, which I know is totally unrelated, but I think more scouts are going to look at Washington State and Mike Leach, the way he coaches his quarterbacks, and take them more seriously, if you will. I think Gordon is bigger than Minshew, and he's got a better arm than Minshew as well. So, and I think he might be overall probably a better athlete as well. So I think this is a kid that slowly but surely is going to see his stock climb up as the draft approaches. But a couple quarterbacks I wanted to talk to you about was a guy that I've been singing his praises all season, a guy that I'm totally in love with here. I'm not, embarrassed to say I got a man crush on. Texas is Sam Ehlinger. I think this kid has a chance to be like top of the draft kind of a quarterback. And I know some might question his size, some might question his arm strength, so on and so forth. Some might question his offensive scheme that he plays in. But to me, Sam Ehlinger has franchise quarterback written all over him. What do you think about Sam Ehlinger?
I certainly have him he's in my top 5 right now in terms of guys that I've graded, and I've probably graded about a dozen quarterbacks at this point. And Ehlinger is someone that I can understand that. He's a guy who will stand tough in the pocket and set his feet and fire the ball. He's willing to take a hit to be able to get rid of that ball. He's someone that also can leave the pocket and work to his right or left and deliver an accurate throw. He finds his open receivers. He can also manipulate in terms of being able to manipulate out of his drop. So to me, it just comes down to decision making, which is the most important aspect of quarterbacking, but it's also the thing that grows the most oftentimes with young players. And I think he makes good decisions overall. I'd just like to see him get a little bit better pre-snap in terms of recognizing certain blitz looks pre-snap, especially inside his own 20, so that he doesn't create situations that are damaging to he and his offense at pivotal points and not get fooled a little bit. But again, a lot of quarterbacks are in that situation as young pros as well as, upperclassmen in college. So I like him. I'm with you.
Have you had a chance to study Jordan Love from Utah State yet?
Yeah, I have.
He's got the quick release, the arm strength, the accuracy, the athleticism, the ability to be a dual threat with his feet and with his arm. I know he's gone off to a slow start, but I think this is a kid that to me just oozes potential in terms of get him with an offensive coordinator, offensive play caller that can take advantage of all that skill set. And I think you got yourself a pretty special kid there as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to like about Love for exactly those reasons. And he's someone that can throw off platform. He can manipulate a defense. He has some skills with full field reads in terms of being able to work the entire width or length of the field and go through multiple reads when he needs to and do it in a timely manner where he's going to be able to find his open receiver. The biggest questions about Love, again, are also a maturity thing, which is, he's a guy that oftentimes, because he's so athletic, oftentimes teams, especially from the high school level and college level, they put a lot on those kids' shoulders to make a play. And so you look at the end of the Wake Forest game where he had multiple plays where the ball should have been intercepted, and then he would continue to make decisions that were unwise. Like after he made one and had a close call and should have been kind of wiped his brow and said, wow, I'm glad that didn't work out the way it could have. Go right back and do the exact same thing. And that's different than, like, say, Joe Burrow, who, might throw into a tight window and it nearly get cut off, but then him be able to recognize the conditions better to know that I still need to hit this and not hesitate. Whereas I think where it was more with, with someone like Love, it's like someone saying, hey man, the stove's hot. Don't put your hand on it. And then he'll put his hand on it and he'll still keep doing it, and it's like, sure, that's kind of where he is. And that concerns me a little bit, but it just, you have to see more to depend on whether it's about him trying to be a hero or him getting frazzled when pressure situations occur and the first couple answers to the plan aren't available. And if you can look at it as it's just immaturity, him trying to take too much on, he might be able to grow out of that. I think Matthew Stafford did to an extent. but if they get frazzled and they start and the wiring shuts down, then you're looking at someone like, say, Kirk Cousins, who tries to be a hero and the wiring shuts down when he's in the pocket, and he looks in the mirror under pressure and he sees Brett Favre, but he's got the arm of Kirk Cousins, which isn't going to make that happen.
Yeah, we got to witness that this past weekend, and when the Vikings receivers saying we need to throw the ball, and you've just invested $84 million in your quarterback, and you still got a year left. Yeah, not sitting good. But we'll turn over to running backs, Matt. I love running backs. There's something about a running back who not only can run over guys, but can make a cut to avoid him as well that I love. And I'd love to hear, a couple of your top running backs.
Sure. And it's my favorite position. Listen, you're a Bears fan. You have Walter Payton.
Absolutely.
You've got Neil Anderson. You've got Matt Forte. I mean, those are great backs. And I was in Cleveland, Jim Brown. I mean, my parents talked about Jim Brown before, just after I was born. So put it to you this way. I think it's a very underrated position, and a lot of the analytics talk about it in a way where they try and diminish that. I think there's more talent out there and less opportunities, which makes it, kind of an underrated position in terms of diagnostic behavior and of the offensive line and things like that, and the versatility they have. Guys, I really like DeAndre Swift out of the University of Georgia. I mean, this is a complete back. This is someone who really understands how to press creases. He can run gap or zone type of schemes very well. He's an excellent receiver, and I can see it already now. People for the umpteenth time saying, well, he hasn't gotten a lot of targets at the University of Georgia. And I'd say you need to go back to his high school tape as well. But I mean, to me, it's about the quality of skills when he is targeted. And this is one of the better receivers actually at the running back position in college football, even if he's not used as such.
Yeah.
He's going to be great up the seam, great on Texas routes over the middle, out the flat. And he has good balance, good footwork. The only thing he doesn't have is that top end breakaway speed. He's not going to give you 70, 80-yard runs on occasion, but he has enough burst that he'll get you 40, 50 yards if the conditions are right, and he's going to give you plenty of explosive plays as the NFL defines them, which are basically 12-yard runs. He's going to be able to give you a lot of chain-moving runs.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal back. Danny, you had him on your list as well.
DeAndre Swift. He was, for me, I believe, was third or fourth overall on my list. My top guy, man, is a guy I want to talk to you about is Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin. Obviously, he's the guy who's put up the yardage, but I think what he's doing this year is more impressive because I think he's showing more. Whether it's a cognizant approach by the coaching staff, but I think he's showing more in the passing game. I think he's showing the ability to be a pass catcher out of the backfield. And I think he's already got 3 or 4 touchdowns as a receiver as well. So he was my top running back coming into this into the season, and he hasn't done anything to diminish that ranking. So your thoughts on Jonathan Taylor? And then I have another kid that I want to talk to you about that I think no one talks about, but I think has a chance to be really good as well. So we'll talk about Taylor first.
Well, I'm looking forward to that, but for sure, hey, listen, Jonathan Taylor is an excellent back, and he reminds me of a back I had graded as my top back in the past 5 years. When he came out, barely edging out Saquon Barkley, which was Nick Chubb. And there's a lot about Jonathan Taylor that reminds me of Nick Chubb in terms of, a big, sturdy back with good footwork, understands how, again, to create creases and manipulate defenders, but do it in a way where he's not always trying to bounce outside, but he can run outside or inside for you. Very good balance, finds the second crease when he is in the hole. Lot to love about his game. Probably can run, I think from what I've seen, zone and gap aren't going to be a problem for him. He can run both. My only issue with him, and it's something that's correctable, is ball security. As just his ball security track record hasn't been great. But you look at a guy like Sony Michel, and he corrected that year one. You can look at a guy like Miles Sanders, and still a little bit of a work in progress for him. But if Jonathan Taylor corrects that, he's as good as any back in this class.
And the other back I was referring to earlier is a kid that I think a lot of people, maybe because he's out in Utah and a lot of people don't watch his games, or maybe it's because he's, unfortunately he's injured a lot. But Zach Moss from Utah, to me, I think has the potential to be a bell cow type of running back in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, a guy who loves him that is mainstream is Lance Zierlein, NFL.com Lance Zierlein. He certainly has liked Zach Moss, but I'll say this. I mean, Moss is a very good zone runner, good footwork, and he has that. In addition to being that powerful guy who can push a pile, pull through wraps, bounce off hits, he also has tremendous flexibility and mobility in his feet and his ankles, knees, and hips. He's the type of guy that can be knocked off balance from an indirect shot, which to me, hard indirect shots to the legs and the lower legs are very difficult to remain balanced with against. And Moss does a pretty good job with that. And so he's certainly one of the guys that I have given a grade that will probably be, close to being a contributor right away in the NFL in terms of what he's done and the breadth of his game in terms of blocking, catching, running is very strong. So I'm with you. He's a very good player.
So, Matt, I have a general scouting question for you. So you've been doing this a long time. How have you seen scouting change, from when you first started to where it is today?
Well, I'm kind of insulated because I'm an outsider that's kind of gotten the good fortune of having insiders kind of recognize my work within the league and different things. So I've had a different process, and that's always continued to grow. But what I have noticed is there seems to be a little bit more recognition now of that certain physical traits in terms of size and weight, while they matter more with certain types of positions, like in the trenches. I mean, you can't be a 230-pound guard,
Right,
so,
right.
But
yeah.
But at the same time, with like the running back, quarterback position, wide receiver position, they've expanded their ranges to understand that there's a lot of different things you can do with players according to what their physical skills, their strengths are, and to minimize some of the things that might be weaker about those players. We're seeing more slot-like sized guys. We're seeing tall guys who might not be extremely fast, but extremely quick, getting their chance. Like Cooper Kupp is a type of guy that is unbelievably quick. I mean, he's got Allen Robinson's quickness, but he just runs a slow 40. But he's a great route runner. So you're seeing, I think, an expansion of saying, we have a broader range of what we're looking for from a physical skill type, and we're a little bit more open to being creative around that.
Yeah. Wow, that's an awesome point of view, man. Phenomenal. And one of the things we want to get from you before we let you go, and we'll let you promote what you got going on, but we want to hear your early season Heisman pick.
So you guys are I have to tell you this quick story because you're probably gonna laugh about this, and I'm glad you asked me this question beforehand. Okay, because before I started doing the Ross Tucker show every week, I literally wrote on my site how proud I was to be so insulated from what was going on in the college media and narratives, because I just watch on my own schedule and study what's going on. That the year that the first time I watched Lamar Jackson, I didn't know he won the Heisman until like 8 months after he won it. Like literally, because that's how I've been. Like, I literally have boxed myself out of those types of narratives, and I just watch I have a schedule of how I watch tape. I mean, I literally watch, I watch about 150 to 180 skill position prospects for my publication every year, and I watch probably 8 to 10 games of each of those guys, and I used to write down play by play what they did. I mean, like, literally this publication, which I mentioned, is literally used to be 1,500 pages, 1,800 pages long, and the readable part that I would tell people, this is what you want to read, is usually about 300, 350, but I showed all my work. So to answer your question with that, I'd have to say, I'm still kind of on the Tua train, understanding, just in terms as an overall player, the quality of competition that the SEC usually tends to be able to have, and what he's done thus far. I think that he's still probably the front runner in this gig, and I just look at his ability to play, and the only thing that I look at him and wonder about a little bit is how good he is at reading leverage of coverage in an advanced level. Like, can he be a great NFL quarterback? And that's the only question I really have with that. But in terms of the RSP, listen, I've been the rookie scouting portfolio is an annual publication. It's available every April 1st. It comes out in two parts. The first part is the pre-draft, that 1,500 page publication that shows all my work, shows how I define every criteria point that I look at, all the grading sheets and how I grade. That's different. It's on a 100-point scale for quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. I do in-depth profiles on each player in terms of what I saw, how they played. I do chapter profiles on the position and how it's changed and how people draft it, and do lots of little things like overrated, underrated. I even show you my process of how I graded them on that 100-point scale, so you can see how I stack rank them against each other in things like, say, for running backs, like power, balance, vision, acceleration, speed, all those different types of skill sets and traits. And so you can see where I have them stacked, where I think they can improve, where I think it's going to be hard for them to improve, and really break it down. And then it goes into a post-draft. That's the second part that I come out with a week after the NFL draft. That's more fantasy friendly, where I kind of do a cheat sheet for people that shows you the difference between my ranking. So if you look at me and go, you're an idiot for ranking Patrick Mahomes first overall, and your best quarterback in 5 years, and Nick Chubb over Saquon Barkley, but you still kind of think he's been around long enough that maybe we need to listen to him a little bit here. Why don't but I don't want to draft him first overall when I can get him like at the 15th or 25th. I give you like a formula that shows you a sweet spot for where you should pick him between where I rank him personally and where fantasy players are drafting him. So I study the average draft position and do all that, and I come out with if you sign up for the RSP, it's available for $21.95, and which you get post-draft, you get the pre-draft that studies the landing spots and the post-draft and all that. But I also do a monthly newsletter. So if you sign up and buy the RSP, you also get on a monthly newsletter from June through December, and I update my rankings 3 times a year for my readers, and that's available at mattwaldmanrsp.com.
Awesome, and people can follow you at Matt Waldman on Twitter as well, and there's a link right to your site on your Twitter profile. Matt, we want to thank you for your time tonight, man. This was awesome, being able to talk defensive linemen, quarterbacks, running backs, your Heisman pick. We can't thank you enough, Matt.
Yeah,
hey, man,
really, Matt.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it, man. I could talk to you for another couple hours still.
I think we all could have a conversation. Next time we'll really need to have a beer or two and
a
and
pizza.
do this.
Deep dish pizza.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. Yes, indeed.
Thank you so much, Matt. We hope you enjoy the rest of your night.
Hey, you too, fellas.
Thank you. Wow, what a great interview, Danny. Nice to kick off the defensive lineman prospects, and now we can turn it right over to your list of your top 10 defensive linemen. So I know we already talked Chase Young, but he is number 1 on your list. And is there anything you want to add, about Chase that maybe we didn't cover?
I mean, pretty much, Matt and I already discussed it, and I said it earlier, Young is not only on my top of my board in terms of the edge rushers, pass rushers, and coming into the season, he very well, by the time this all plays out, in April towards the draft, he could be my top rated player. That's how much I like about Chase Young. Like Matt and I were talking about. You look at his tape and you have to start nitpicking a little bit. You got to find things he does wrong. I mean, you have to literally look for things like that because, like I said, he's got the size of 6'4", 260 pounds. He's got those long arms. I mean, he's got a chiseled body. I don't think there's any sort of body fat on him. I mean, I know. And in terms of not only does he get to the passer in terms of rushing the quarterback, but when he gets there, he devours the quarterback. There's times where a pass rusher will get to the quarterback and get an arm on him, or the quarterback can wiggle away from. Not with Young. Young gets him and he devours him with his long arms. Another thing with him is he's got that the ability to kind of sense when the ball is going to get out before he gets there. So he puts his arms up and he's got those long arms to kind of block the passing lane of the quarterback. So I mean, so far, like I'm telling you, I kind of wish I had more time with Matt because I was going to say, like, for me right now, Chase Young is a better overall grade, has a better overall grade and better overall prospect than Nick Bosa was last year coming out of Ohio State, and he went number 2 overall. So for me, Chase Young over Nick Bosa all day so far.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, that's fantastic. Moving on to number 2, we have Jabari Zuniga out of Florida. What do you like about him, Danny?
Yeah, this is a kid that I actually was on my radar last year, and I thought as a junior had a chance, if he came out, could have been, a first-round pick possibly. But Zuniga is a talented defensive end, outside linebacker, prospect from the University of Florida. And the thing about him is I love his, he's got a good size. That's 6'3", 240 pounds, but I love his athletic ability. He's got that lateral quickness that I look for in these defensive end / edge prospects. He's got those oily, flexible hips. He's able to change directions, in the open field. That's not an issue for him. He's got that short area burst to close in on a target. Very quick off the snap. He's the guy that gets engaged with his blocker, as soon as the ball is snapped. So I like the way he just, leaps out of his stance. He demonstrates a good body lean, the ability to bend the corner and then flatten to the quarterback quickly, once he's beaten the tackle. So, the thing about him is, as a run defender, I like the way he slips blocks and he penetrates into the gaps and gets into the backfield. He was off to a great start this year. Within 2 games, I think he had 3 sacks already. Unfortunately, he's missed the last 2 games due to an ankle injury, but he's coming back actually this week to face Auburn and to face Prince Tego Wanagoa, the offensive tackle for Auburn. So that's going to be a matchup that I'm looking forward to watching this weekend is Florida versus Auburn. I want to see Jabari Zuniga versus Prince and see how that matches up. Now he's a kid that has played predominantly defensive end at Florida, but he's about 6'3", 240 pounds. So I kind of see him as a kid that could play some outside linebacker, stand up in a 2-point stance and rush. And I think I said athletically, I think he can drop back into coverage, and he's got the ability, the feet and the lateral quickness to be able to move in coverage. So I think he's a guy that brings that scheme versatility where if you want to put his hand in the ground and make him a defensive end, although he'll probably struggle in terms of a run defense if you run right at him as a defensive end. But if you put him out in space as a stand-up 2-point linebacker, I think he's a guy that can also succeed there as well. So scheme versatility is going to be something that I talk about a lot. I talked about it a lot when we were talking about offensive linemen because I like guys that can play multiple positions up and down the line. The same thing here with defensive ends and eventually when we get to defensive tackles, guys that play multiple positions, rank higher for me because that versatility is seen by offensive coaches as a plus.
Yeah, I mean, without question, I think somebody that you can move around. I mean, it just adds more depth really to your defensive line without a doubt. You look at the number 3 prospect on your list out of Notre Dame, Julian Aguara. Notre Dame, not a bad team this year. I mean, saw him a few weeks ago. This kid was all over the place. I can't remember if it was last week or was it Auburn they played against where he really had Georgia. Maybe it was Georgia.
Right.
I think it might have been Georgia where he went nuts.
Right. And this is a kid that right away the thing that sticks out about him is his athleticism, his size. Is 6'4", 235, 240 pounds. Is a second year. This is going to be his second year as a starter. Last year was really his first year of starting on a full-time basis, and he had 12 and a half tackles for loss, 8 sacks, and 21 quarterback hurries. One thing about him is we talked about that size, but the length. He's got some long arms, and this is another kid that's well put together. He's got a chiseled frame. His solid foot quickness and lateral movement skills. We're talking about an athlete in space. Another guy that you can line up on either side, the left or the right, and stand him up in a 2-point stance. And this is a kid that can make plays for you off the edge. He's got very good athletic ability. This guy can start and stop and has no deficiencies when needing to change directions suddenly. He's a kid that he's got active hands as a pass rusher. He's a guy that will go to the outside shoulder of a tackle and lean and get that leverage and create that seam, that opening for him to get to the quarterback. So in terms of as a pass rusher, he's got some ways to go, but I like the way he generates. In terms of as a bull rusher, for a kid 235 pounds, 240 pounds, you really don't expect him to be that good as a bull rusher, but I like the way he just gets into when he plays long, when he extends his arms into the chest of a tackle, he rolls his hips, he generates that lower body strength, and he gets that blocker on his heels. That to me shows good play strength, good core strength, a solid lower half, strong legs that be able to generate that power. For a kid between 235 240 pounds, you don't, like I said, you don't necessarily expect that, but when he does that, it kind of shocks you and it surprises you. I've seen this kid make plays in coverage. 20 plus yards down the field, he's down there covering a ball and deflecting a pass away from a receiver. So he can go out in the flat, and play some coverage, and you could probably cover a running back, out there as well. So just the athlete, the size. And again, he's just still developing to me. This guy is only going to get better and better. I just love the total package.
Yeah, I mean, looking him up, I believe last season he led the team in tackles for loss and tied for first in sacks. I mean, he lives in the offensive backfield.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. It's like that was his first year as a starter. So again, that's why I'm saying this guy's only going to get better and better. And you saw. I think this season he's already off to a decent start with 4 sacks. So, he once he develops that repertoire, once he develops a more consistent, pass rush move, this is going to get better, in my opinion.
Yeah. Curtis Weaver, number 4 on your list out of Boise State. He's currently tied for 4th all-time at Boise State with 22.5 career sacks. What do you like about Curtis Weaver, Danny?
Yeah, again, we go out to Boise State, and it seems like every year they produce either it's an offensive lineman. Last week we talked about Ezra Cleveland, the tackle or edge rusher or something like that, and Weaver is another guy that comes into that category. A 2-time All Mountain West, first team academic All Mountain West. So this kid's he's smart. He's got a good head on his shoulders, and the one thing about Weaver. Kind of knocked him down for me was, he doesn't have the ideal height that I want. I usually look for guys at 6'3", 6'4", and taller. He's about 6'2", but he's got 260 plus pounds, and he's got a thick frame. So he does a good job of creating that bull rush, creating that power at the point of attack. So I like the way he does that. I like his ability to dip his shoulder and get underneath the offensive lineman's pads, to bend the corner and then flatten to the quarterback. This is another guy who uses his hands, to create that leverage and, to get a blocker and control his shoulder, whether it's his inside shoulder or his outside shoulder. He uses his hands well to create some leverage. He's a guy that has lined up as a defensive end with his hand in the ground, or as a outside rush linebacker in a 2-point stance. And, when I project him to the NFL, I kind of see him more as that outside linebacker. The only thing that I hesitate when I say that is because, he's kind of limited in terms of athleticism. So his change of direction isn't like we talked about with Okora or with Chase Young. He's not to that level. So, he might be someone that, depending on who takes him, he could be lined up. I can see him lined up as a wide 9 defensive end. Think of Jim Schwartz and the system he uses with the Eagles, where he lines the defensive ends way outside to the tackle's outside shoulder. You could see him. He's more of like a straight line guy coming off the edge. Or I could see him, like I said, as an outside linebacker with some limitations in coverage.
The number 5 player on your top 10 defensive lineman list, my guy, number 94 out of the Cuse, Alton Robinson. I've been able to see him, not this past week, but the last couple weeks prior to this week, live in person. I love this guy, Danny. I mean, he's got a motor that doesn't quit. You see him, a big play for the offense. You see him running all the way down the field, still trying to make a tackle. I just love this kid. What do you like about him?
Well, I just love listening to you give me his scouting report. I mean, that was it, man. There's nothing else I can say. I mean, you pretty much covered everything for me. I mean, and I was gonna give you the floor here because, like I said, this is your guy from Syracuse. You watch him live multiple times, what I mean? And again, I'm going to throw it back to you, but for me, just watching his tape is the first thing that sticks out to me is his motor. And you just mentioned it. This kid, his engine never stops. He's got that first, that good first step quickness off the line of scrimmage. And like I said, he will not give up on a play. He's got that good closing speed. He's got those long legs that makes up ground quickly. So like all these things I love about him. I have some questions in terms of, change of direction. Can he play in space? I see some hip stiffness, but when you put his tape on, the first thing you see is him, his effort, his engine, and him always, either affecting the quarterback or getting to the quarterback. So, like, is there anything I missed about him? I'm going to throw the mic back to you here.
One of the things that I wanted to see improvement on, and I think I've seen that so far this season, was his production in the run game. And I think he's done a lot better of a job this year, in the run game, sealing an edge, breaking away from the block to make a tackle. And if you've watched any Syracuse football, tackling is very hard for them to do.
The one thing, speaking of as a run defender, the one thing I did, obviously he's higher on my grading system because of his ability to rush the passer. But when you take a look at his ability as a run defender, I like his mental processing ability. He quickly finds and locates the football, so he can diagnose post-snap right away. That's very important for a defensive lineman. I like the way he takes on double teams. He's got solid play strength. I like the way he stacks and sheds at the point of contact. So all this kind of plays into, being a good run defender. Now, is he the best run defender out there? No, he's not. And you've seen it, firsthand. But I think that's something that he can get better at. That's something you can coach. But that first step quickness, that engine, that nonstop motor that go after the quarterback, the relentlessness to go after that quarterback, you don't coach that. That's something that's born in you and that's innate in you. And he has that. Being able to get off blocks, shed blocks, and get stronger at the point of attack. You can always, make him, coach him up or get him stronger.
Yeah, he's one from the SU website, one of the most feared pass rushers in the nation. He's been named to the watch list for the Bednarik Award. He was presented to college football's Defensive Player of the Year, rated the number 12 defensive end in the country and the best pass rusher in the ACC by Lindy's. He's a 2019 preseason All-ACC first-team selection by Athlon, Street and Smith, Lindy's, and Phil Steele, and he's tied with Miami's Shaquille Quaterman for the most career sacks among active ACC players with 15. And I know he had at least one last week, so that may be a little bit higher now. But yeah, I love this kid. I got to get me a 94 SU jersey. No question. So we talked about Kenny Wilkes with Matt Waldman at the beginning of the show, Danny. But this kid, oh my gosh! Like Matt said, speed. One of the things was his speed, but he's such an athlete. Sometimes that can work itself out. Is there anything you want to add to what you guys discussed earlier?
No, like I said, a highly productive kid, and playing in a very a good system in Michigan State. Had 20.5 tackles for loss last year, 8 sacks, 4 passes defensed. He's a kid that, like I said earlier, he's got that junkyard dog type mentality. This is a kid that you see him. He's a play chaser. What I mean by that is he can go from the hash mark to the sidelines and chase down a running back on a toss, a toss pitch or a run that's designed to go to the outside. I like seeing that effort in a guy. And the only thing about him is I didn't see the lack of foot speed could be an issue, but I see some athleticism and I think he might be better off on the outside in terms of as an outside pass rusher, as like outside linebacker, as opposed to being a hand in the ground defensive end. I'm still debating that aspect of it when I'm projecting him to the next level, because he is about 6'3", 255 pounds. So I could see him, putting on some more muscle and probably playing a couple snaps at defensive end. But and just in terms of, again, another guy whose motor does not stop, a guy highly productive at a Power 5 school, Power 5 conference in a Big Ten school. So this is a kid that I don't know if a lot of people know about him. Unless you watch a lot of Michigan State football or a lot of Big Ten football, you probably never heard of Kenny Wilkes. But he's a kid that I think as the scouting process winds down towards April and we get to the draft, we'll be hearing more and more of the national media talk about Kenny Wilkes because of the fact of the motor, the ability to be a hash mark to sideline, chaser, playmaker, and also his versatility. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to wow a lot of guys with his football character. He's going to do well in the interviews. I think this guy's stock's only going to go higher and higher.
Moving on to number 7 on your list, from Alabama, returning for his senior season, Anthony Jennings. Danny, what do you like about him?
It seems like lately, and correct me if I'm wrong, Badge, but every time we talk about Alabama, we talk about Tua, we talk about Judy, we talk about the offensive skill position players. These guys still have some playmakers on defense, believe it or not, guys. And Jennings, to me, is one of them. I mean, he's a guy that I don't think gets enough hype, in terms of being a disruptive force on defense. But he's a guy, for me, he's just a physical presence. I mean, he's only about 6'2", 255. But again, I mean, in terms of the size, the length, the height, he doesn't have it, but he's got those long arms again. He had 11 passes defensed last season. And if you watch a lot of his tape, you see if he doesn't get to the quarterback, he's got that awareness to put his arms up, again, blocking the passing window of a quarterback and knocking that ball down. That might not be a sack, but that's an incompletion. That's a positive play for a defense, And like I said, he's got active hands. This guy is a fighter. He'll swipe, he'll swim, he'll rip through the arms of a blocker. He's a guy that he's physical, like I said, physical for his size. He'll battle anyone, no matter how big the guy across from him is. This guy will not back down from anybody. I've seen a couple times where they try to line a tight end on him and try and block him. Tight ends can't block him one-on-one. As simple as that. College tight ends cannot block him one-on-one.
Sure.
So, and I like his awareness as a pass rusher. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times you see pass rushers when they get upfield, the tackle just kind of eases them right by the quarterback in the pocket, and they go upfield, and lo and behold, the quarterback can step up, and there's a big gap there. No, with Jennings, he's cognizant of that. He looks, if he's rushing and he sees the quarterback stepping up in the pocket, he then alters his rush to counter for that moving target. So, stuff like that, I like seeing. Typically with Nick Saban type defenders, you see guys who have that, the ability to kind of diagnose and read a key and see something like that and be able to adjust. So he's just a kid. Again, 6.5 sacks last year, had 6 quarterback hurries, 14 tackles for loss. We talked about the 11 passes defense. So he's a kid that actually last year was coming off a knee injury. Remember, he got hurt in that game against Clemson in the college football playoff. And then, so last year was coming off of an ACL. So this is a second year removed from that injury. I think he has a chance to be even more of a presence on defense for Alabama this season.
Yeah, and you look at his accolades, selected as a second-team preseason All-American by the Sporting News, also tabbed as the Bronco Nagurski Trophy and Butkus Award watch list. So, I mean, you can look anywhere on the Alabama roster, whether it's offense, defense, special teams, and find somebody that is going to be a phenomenal NFL prospect. And Anthony Jennings is just another one of those to add to that list. You look to number 8 on your list. It's Yetur Gross-Matos out of Penn State. Danny, this was a name that I hadn't seen on your list, but, Penn State had a tough run with Pitt the other day, and Matos, decent player in that game for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, Matos is only a junior, and last year as a sophomore was his first year starting, and really, I mean, he had a phenomenal season. 20 tackles for loss, 8 sacks. I think he became like the 12th Penn State player to record 20 tackles for loss in a season. I think he had a streak of at least 1 tackle for loss in 8 straight games. So, for a sophomore playing his first season as a starter, I think he showed himself well, and he only got better as the season went along. And I think about him as we talked about his size. He's about 6'4", 6'5", 260 pounds. For me, he's a base 4.3 end. Okay, He's got long strides. He eats up ground quickly. Solid change of direction for a guy that size. So that tells me he's athletic. Okay,
absolutely.
He processes quickly. He can identify his keys and recognize run versus pass post snap. And you want to see that. A lot of times you see guys nowadays in college, especially with these RPOs or these play action, kind of freeze these guys. They don't read their keys quick enough, and lo and behold, they're going after the quarterback while the running back is already 5 yards down the field. So, but with Gross-Matos, he does a good job of recognizing post snap what the play is going to be. Pretty much, he uses his size, his length, his hands, and his energy to go after and get quarterbacks. So he's still developing. Like I said, he's not a finished product yet. His lower body strength still needs to be developed. He's got some, a slim lower half, so you can see him as a run defender get kind of bullied and pushed out of the way. So I need to see him get better there. He's not an explosive athlete. He's not a guy that's got quick twitch. He's not a guy that'll explode off the line of scrimmage. So that's why I see him more as a 4-3 base end, a guy who will develop into his body eventually, a guy who will be stout against the run, and a guy who will give you some pressure off the edge as well.
Mm-hmm. He's selected to the preseason Lot Impact Trophy watch list, named to the preseason Bednarik Award watch list, tabbed on the preseason Bronco Nagurski Award watch list, and he was selected for the preseason Big Ten Honors list, which was voted on by conference media members. So being recognized by some of the media, definitely not a bad thing. Number 9 on your list out of Iowa, AJ Epinesa. Am I saying that right?
Epinesa, I believe is how it's pronounced.
Epinesa. Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, this is a kid that last year came onto the scene as not even as a starter, as just like a rotational kid. I think led the Big Ten in sacks at 10.5. Was second in the Big Ten with four forced fumbles. But yeah, he is another kid. He's got the size. He's big, 6'5", 270 pounds. This is a kid that as a base 4-3 defensive end, it's going to be a size. A guy gives you good size and good play strength. He can maintain his position at the line of scrimmage. He's got those strong hands. He can stack and shut blockers at the point of attack. Has a bit of a dip. He has got some athleticism in terms of creating a pass rush. But really, for me, he's low on this list only because of the fact that I see him more as a 4-3 end, and I don't see him as being as athletic as some of the other prospects we've talked about so far. However, he did have that great year of production last year, so you got to give him credit for that. Sure. I do want to see how he follows up. So far, he's off to a slow start, but a lot of that is mainly because of some of the extra attention he's seeing now because of his great season last year. And also, he's got, I think, 5 or 6 quarterback hurries. So he's still making his presence known on the edge there. Just for me, he's a base defensive end with some limited athleticism, who's going to be strong against the run. And those guys, I don't rate him as high as some of the other players we've talked about already. But he's going to be a solid pro, no doubt about it.
Yeah, he, as you mentioned, led the Big Ten and ranked 12th nationally in sacks with 10.5 last year. So clearly, definitely has some talent. Rounding out your top 10 out of the University of Miami, Jonathan Gervin. What do you like about Gervin, Danny? Or is it Garvin? I can't even read my own spreadsheet.
Yeah, Jonathan Garvin out of Miami. Another guy, just a junior, going to be going to his second season as a starter. Really had a breakthrough year last year. 60 tackles, 17 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, 5 passes defense. Another kid has got great size. He's about 6'4", 6'5", long limbs, long arms, long strides. This is a kid that makes up ground quickly. He possesses the athletic ability and lateral quickness to take an outside step and then cross the offensive tackle face mask. So basically, he has one of those rope-a-dope moves where he kind of steps outside, makes the tackle thinks he's going out. The tackle kind of sways his weight to the outside leg, and then quickly he crosses his face and goes inside. That type of athleticism, that type of quickness, and a guy this size is something like that you take notice of, and that's why I think Garvin is a guy that made my list. He's a guy that also has the ability to dip his shoulder and rip through the offensive tackle's arms to gain that outside leverage. Mm-hmm. He's got the ability to bend the outside corner and then flatten to the quarterback. I just think his combination of quickness off the snap, the ability to swipe and rip and get the outside leverage, I think, and with his size, I think and it's still developing too. So he's a guy that's still, hasn't gotten to the point where he's a finished product. Obviously, just a true junior. I think this guy's got potential to develop into one of those pass rushers that NFL teams like to have off the edge. Now, he's a guy that, with this size, I kind of see him more of as a defensive end. However, if you want to stand him up or kind of move him around, I could see that happen as well. Mm-hmm. But I think more so than not, I think this guy will be a guy who has got his hands in the ground and is a 4-3 defensive end.
Yeah, you look 2 weeks ago against Central Michigan, he had a sack, a forced fumble, 3 total tackles, 2 of which were solo. So, certainly a big impact player for the Hurricanes, who are happy to have him without question. And goodness gracious, Danny, what a phenomenal show we've had so far, and we've still got college football news to get into here as we finished with your top 10. And the first story I kind of want to talk to you about is LSU running back Leonard Fournette leaving the team. obviously he's the younger brother of former Jacksonville Jaguars running back Leonard Fournette, and I'm just a little surprised by this. He's a senior. He only carried the ball 13 times for 36 yards throughout 4 games in the season. You think this is a good decision for him to leave? Do you think there's anything behind the scenes related to this, or?
Well, first of all, unless something happened within the last 40 minutes, I think Leonard Fournette still is a Jacksonville Jaguars running back. I think you said former running back.
Well, this is Leonard.
Yeah, Leonard, his brother. Yeah, I was just joking there. Leonard. When I read the story, I think basically what it sounded like, he's just a guy who didn't like football. I mean, there was a source in the article quoted as saying he just wants to move on with his life. To me, that tells me that's a guy that has got a famous brother, Leonard Fournette, and he was made to go to LSU, and he just didn't love the game, and he wasn't getting much, snaps or carries. So I just think he just said, you know what, I'm done with this, and I haven't heard anything other than that, other than a story we saw on ESPN. So, it just seems like, to me, a guy that just didn't love the game or wasn't getting an opportunity, because I don't think he's even in the transfer portal. So, if he wanted to go on to somewhere else, he could probably redshirt, do the whole transfer portal thing and find another opportunity. But so far, all I've heard of was he just up and left. So we'll see what happens with him. But to me, that just sounds like a guy who just didn't love the game and just was doing it because his brother was doing it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it just, you see the NFL bloodline, and it's just kind of like, whoa, like, just kind of takes you back. Moving on, so I want to thank ESPN for this article. Some Power 5 coaches on the hot seat already entering October, and number 1 on their list, and we want to thank Adam Rittenberg for this list at ESPN. Jeremy Pruitt out of Tennessee, man, the Vols really struggling here. 1-3 this season. Pruitt signed through 2023 at $3.8 million a year. Is this really a possibility that Pruitt could be out? Maybe not even. Maybe before the season's over. Well,
before the season's over might be a stretch there. I think that'd be a surprise, because I don't know if they have anybody on staff that they're going to want to promote right away. But I definitely can see Pruitt losing his job after the season is done, because I mean, it's just that program is a mess. I mean, from the kids transferring, from blown late minute leads in games. I think Tennessee, that's a proud school, and I remember when they used to be a powerhouse, back in the day when Peyton Manning was their quarterback and all that stuff. So it would not shock me if he is dismissed after the season, but during the season would be a shock, just because you're already 5 games in. What are you going to do really if you make a change? Right. Unless there's a coach candidate on their staff that they feel like, hey, this guy can make a difference right now, and can kind of show future recruits, hey, look, we got a bright young coach or whatnot. And we're headed in the right direction, But it's funny, because I also saw that the AD Philip Fulmer might be interested in coming back. He was also the former coach. Might be interested in coming back on the sidelines and coaching this. I'm like, these guys who live in the past. Like I said, once you've been a coach, it's so hard to get that coaching gene out of you. And it's like, no matter how long you've been out of the game, no matter how what age you are, you always you feel like you can make a difference. You want to come back, and I think Fulmer would be a mistake to bring back as a coach, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I think Pruitt is probably done after the season.
Next on this list, former Chicago Bear head coach, none other than Lovie Smith. Yeah, 2-2 on the season, 11-29 overall. I mean, to me, this isn't as a surprise. Your thoughts on Lovie, Danny?
It's not a surprise that he's on this list, but the question I'm not a big Lovie Smith fan. I was on record back when he was the Bears coach. I wasn't a big fan of his, in terms of him being a head coach. But if you're the University of Illinois, who are you going to bring in that's going to bring you credibility other than Lovie Smith? I mean, tell me some guy that's going to want to take this job. Right. Off the top of my head, I can't, unless you're some sort of young assistant that wants to use the University of Illinois as a stepping stone to your next big gig. I don't see anybody taking this job. What was it? PJ Fleck, did he not even want to interview for when he was with Western Michigan or Central Michigan? I forgot it was, and he ended up going to Minnesota. I don't think he even got an interview, or maybe he didn't even want an interview for the job when Lovie Smith got it. So, it's the thing is like I think Lovie Smith now, you're seeing him bring in some of these transfer kids, and he's getting some more talent into the program. It's been 5 years, I believe, right, or 4 years now for him.
Yeah, I think it is 4.
Yeah, and he just signed on the contract extension at the end of last season. So, to me, if you want to fire him, okay, I can see why you want to fire him. But tell me, who are you going to bring in? Who's going to come on and take this job and going to make Illinois, a program that kids want to go to? Local kids here in the area and local kids in Illinois. At least Lovie Smith has that name, that recognition. Former Bears coach. He's very good in terms with his players. Players love playing for him.
Yep.
And he's got one hell of a beard, by the way. But
oh my gosh, it's big and white.
But the thing is, like, you want to fire him, fine. Who are you going to bring in? Tell me that. Who's going to come in here and give Illinois credibility?
Yeah, well, maybe it's one of these other guys on this list. For all we know, the name on this list I think that's most shocking to me and is Clay Helton. I mean, Lynn Swann, the athletic director, just stepped down. He's got 2 quarterbacks that, I think maybe both lost for the season. At least JT Daniels, I think, is gone for the season. Right. I just don't feel like he's had a fair shake.
Yeah, I think in terms of this season, I think for me, SC has been more competitive than I expected them to be. Mm-hmm. And especially after losing their first and second string quarterbacks. However, this has been, and we talked about Urban Meyer a couple weeks ago. This has been a school that has been rumored as the return spot for Urban Meyer. So with the AD Lynn Swann stepping down, that only kind of sets the wheels in motion for a coaching change. So if Helton is gone, and I think this is an opportunity where you might see Urban Meyer get back into coaching and coach SC. But that's always been the rumor. But as soon as Urban Meyer stepped down from Iowa State, it was always like, well, Clay Helton's on thin ice out there in SC. If he ever steps down, look for Urban Meyer to be the primary candidate to replace him. And if this happens, if Helton is fired, I'd say my money's on Urban Meyer.
Yeah. Lastly on this list is, and really not a surprise here, Willie Taggart from Florida State. I feel like the heydays of Florida State seem to be so far gone that they're just struggling to find somebody really that can help the university do anything football wise. Are you surprised by this, Danny, or does it not really come as a shock to you?
I'm surprised only because Willie Taggart left Oregon for a lucrative contract to coach. I believe he played at Florida State, if I'm not mistaken. So for them to kind of give up on a guy that's an alumni, it's kind of shocking. But again, with Florida State, you see the lack of enthusiasm, the lack of want to from some of these players in some of those early games where they blew that big lead to Boise State early in the season. So, but the one thing about with Florida State, which is a little bit shocking in my opinion, is I don't think they can afford to pay off his contract.
Yeah, that's what this article states is that, if they let him go, it doesn't sound like they've got the money to pay the guarantees. Yeah. Right. Which is kind of shocking. And, as funny as it sounds being the ACC, they've still got Clemson coming up, Wake Forest, and then Syracuse, all this month. So some tough games coming up for Florida State as well.
Right. And then the one thing about the common denominator in all 4 of these so-called hot seats are neither one of these coaches has a quarterback that they can rely on. Whether, we're not talking about a superstar like an NFL quarterback. We're talking about a reliable leader at that position that can rally his teammates around him to play hard, to go ahead and give their full effort. And what's his name? Alex Hornibrook, the ex Wisconsin Badger, has come in to be the savior for Florida State. Because James Blackman wasn't doing the job initially, or maybe he might have gotten hurt. I'm not sure. But this is something that with all 4 of these guys is you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a leader of that position. It's very hard to win, even in college football.
Sure. I totally agree with you, Danny. I mean, really, without a quarterback that can move the ball down the field for your team and some sign of a running game, it's hard to win at any level in playing the game of football. Moving on to the games this weekend, Danny, what are the games you're going to be paying attention to this weekend?
Well, we already talked about the Florida and Auburn game. That's going to be a big matchup. It's going to be two ranked teams, and like I said, for my purposes, for scouting purposes, I'm looking for my guy Jabari Zuniga to go up against Prince, the left tackle for Auburn. So that's a game that I'm going to have earmarked in terms of watching. Another game that's drawn my interest, and again, scouting purposes, is Utah State's Jordan Love going up against LSU. LSU's coming off their bye week. Utah State's coming off of a close victory over Colorado State. So we'll see how that goes. But this is the game that early on in our first show that Jordan Reed and I talked about when we talked about Jordan Love, that this was going to be his coming out party, if you will, to the NFL community, to NFL scouts. If he's going to show that he's got the ability to play with the big boys in the NFL, and if he wants to come out this season, this is going to be a game where he needs to show out. So that's a game that I hope to catch on the SEC network and see how Jordan Love. Now, I'm not expecting him to beat LSU. I'm just saying I want to see him to, how he plays against them. This is going to be a step up in competition big time. He's going to go up against some defenders that are going to be playing in the NFL next season. So I want to see how Jordan Love handles himself in this game. And then just because Michigan is a car crash right now, I want to see Iowa versus Michigan. I want to see what Jim Harbaugh does.
Sure.
I mean, if you lose at home to Iowa, even though Iowa's ranked 14th and Michigan's 20th or 19th in the nation right now, if you lose to Iowa at home, I mean, I don't know. Do you think Jim Harbaugh goes on top of that list we just talked about the most on the hot seat coaches? But so that's a game I'm gonna keep an eye on as well. And then the other one is Texas versus West Virginia. West Virginia, one of their starting safeties, I heard today that he is going to do the whole transfer portal, red shirt thing. He's one of their starting safeties. So I want to see if my guy Sam Ehlinger can take advantage of one of their the defensive backs for West Virginia being down, and see what kind of game he has. But so Texas and West Virginia is a game that I'm going to be watching. And of course, the main attraction is going to be the ABC game at night. ABC here locally in Chicago. That is Michigan State versus Ohio State.
Yep.
Again, it's going to be another test where we're going to see Justin Fields, see how he performs against a defense that's got some NFL prospects. We already talked about Kenny Willekes. We talked, they have a middle linebacker, Joe Bacci, I'm very high on. They have a defensive tackle, McDowell, that I'm pretty high on as well. So, and they have some decent corners and safety prospects as well. So I want to see how Justin Fields continues to grow and show his maturity as a passer, not just a runner of the football. So those four games are ones I've earmarked for this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of good football without question coming up this weekend. And Danny, what a great show we had. Your top 10 defensive linemen, a fantastic list. We want to thank our guest, Matt Waldman, for coming on, for his great insight on the show tonight. Thanking everyone who listened live and joined us in the Mixlr chat, and we hope you enjoyed this week's show. If you can't join us live, you can find the podcast version of Draft on Tap shortly after the show airs, or if you're already asleep, the morning after, and on all your favorite podcast streams. Thank you to Aldo Gandia for holding down the fort for us tonight and his great work as always, and a big shout out to the voice of the bar room, Mr. Dan Aguirre. We love Dan. He's killing it with everything he does here at the bar room, and everyone else here at Bears Bar Room who continues to make this network so spectacular. Thank you all very much. Join us next week for another episode of Draft on Tap. Good night, everybody.
Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandia to remind you that after every Chicago Bears game, we have Last Call. That's where Draft Dr. Phil and I analyze the Bears' performance, and we interact with you in the chat room. So join us here on our Mixlr.com channel, and if you can't make it, the podcast will be up about 3 to 4 hours after the game.